This is Land of Havilah, Zechariah 11. As we've said, Zechariah lived among the returned captives. Nobody wanted to hear about deja vu all over again, but that's what Yahweh's about to tell them. In the coming prophecy, the trees, shepherds, and young lions are all metaphors for Israel's leaders. The flock's a metaphor for the people. The leaders are supposed to be shepherding the flock, but instead they're eating them, selling them, and getting rich off them. The prophecy doesn't necessarily apply to Zechariah's generation because they've repented, and Yahweh's been speaking encouraging words about them and their leaders, Haggai 1, 12 and 13, but the prophecy definitely applies as a commentary on the past and prediction of the future. Verse 1, "Open your doors, Lebanon, that the fire may devour your cedars. Wail, cypress tree, for the cedar has fallen, because the stately ones are destroyed. Wail, you oaks of Bashan, for the strong forest has come down. A voice of the wailing of the shepherds, for their glory is destroyed, a voice of the roaring of young lions, for the pride of the Jordan is ruined." Comment in verse 1, "Let fire devour the cedars." In verse 2, "The trees will wail, because the whole forest of them is destroyed." In verse 3, "Shepherds will wail, because their glory is destroyed." Their voice goes up like the roar of lions, but it's not a confident roar. It's more like desperation or the roar of ruin. It all speaks of Israel's proud leaders being destroyed along with their nation. The mighty have fallen and will fall again. The leaders were proud lions and stately like massive trees. Verse 4, "Yahweh my God says, feed the flock of slaughter." Comment, Israel and Judah are the flock of slaughter. Many times Yahweh gave them over to slaughter in large numbers. With seeming finality, when Yahweh slaughtered them by the Assyrian and Babylonian kings. He'll do it again in 70 AD by the Romans. Yahweh says, feed the flock of slaughter, meaning feed my people, with the recognition that they're headed for slaughter again. Verse 5, "Their buyers slaughter them and go unpunished. Those who sell them say, Blessed be Yahweh, for I am rich, and their own shepherds don't pity them." Comment, King Manasseh was one of the many examples of this. He was evil, idolatrous, persecuted the prophets, and dragged all Judah down with him. Yahweh finally lost his patience and determined to destroy all of them but a small remnant. Like any worthless leader, Manasseh considered his people to be instruments of his own profit. He didn't pity them, he profited from them. He said in verse 5, "Blessed be Yahweh, for I am rich." He slaughtered his sheep and went unpunished. He didn't outright kill large numbers of them, but rather was leading them down the path of slaughter, as Yahweh made clear to him through the prophets. He was just one example of the same throughout most of Judah's history. Woe to the foolish shepherds, Yahweh says. They should be ruling in righteousness for the people's benefit, rather than making themselves fat and leading their people to destruction, eating the sheep, so to speak, leading them to slaughter. Coming up because of such leaders and their wicked people, verse 6, "For I will no more pity the inhabitants of the land, says Yahweh, but behold, I will deliver the men, everyone into his neighbor's hand, and into the hand of his king. They will strike the land, and out of their hand I will not deliver them." Comment, Yahweh will not deliver them from the foreigners who come to strike their land. Back in verse 4, Yahweh told Zechariah, "Feed the flock of slaughter." Therefore, verse 7, "So I fed the flock of slaughter, especially the oppressed of the flock. I took for myself 2 staffs, the one I called favor, and the other I called union, and I fed the flock." Comment, Ezekiel wrote just before Zechariah's time. To Ezekiel, Yahweh said, "Take one stick and write the name Judah on it. Take another stick and write the name Israel on it. Then join them together into one stick, because I'll take them from among the nations, bring them back into the land, and unite them under King David. They'll dwell there with me forever. I'll be their God. My tent will be over them." All of which sounds very much like the Messianic kingdom to come. But the point is that through Ezekiel, Yahweh's already established the metaphor of Judah and Israel being sticks, and he's already said he'll unite them. Now in verse 7 we just read, since no one was feeding the flock in the prophecy, Yahweh told Zechariah to take up 2 staffs to shepherd the flock himself, this flock of the future. At Yahweh's command, Zechariah called one staff favor, meaning Yahweh wanted to do good for the flock, and the other union, referring to Yahweh's intention to unify Judah and Israel, as he makes clear in verse 14 coming up. Verse 8, I cut off the 3 shepherds in 1 month, for my soul was weary of them, and their soul also loathed me. Comment, Yahweh cut off 3 shepherds in 1 month, which is wide open for speculation. It could be past, future, or both. Yahweh's soul was weary of those leaders, and their souls hated him. Now, speaking of a time when Yahweh resigns from shepherding his people because they won't have him, verse 9, Then I said, I will not feed you. That which dies, let it die, and that which is to be cut off, let it be cut off, and let those who are left eat each other's flesh. Comment, that was certainly true of the sieges that ended the northern and southern kingdoms. In both cases, Yahweh gave some to death, some to famine, some to sword, and some to captivity, Jeremiah 15:2. It was because he finally said, I will not feed you. And it would be true again in 70 A.D. when he would cut them off by the Romans. Since he didn't favor them anymore, verse 10, I took my staff favor and cut it apart, that I might break my covenant that I had made with all the peoples. It was broken in that day, and thus the poor of the flock that listened to me knew that it was Yahweh's word. Comment, leading up to the various episodes of destruction and in the throes of them, the vast majority of the people ignored Yahweh. Without the light of God, they didn't know what to make of the times they were in. They had no insight. They were being destroyed and didn't know why. But the poor of the flock who listened to Yahweh knew what was behind the destruction, that it was Yahweh's judgment. Now, 2 verses in prediction of the future, forwarding to about 30 A.D., the shepherds of Israel would again be in their usual state of rebellion against Yahweh, in their usual state of darkness, and not recognize the Messiah. Verse 12, I said to them, If you think it best, give me my wages, and if not, keep them. So they weighed for my wages 30 pieces of silver. Yahweh said to me, Throw it to the potter, the handsome price that I was valued at by them. I took the 30 pieces of silver and threw them to the potter in Yahweh's house. Comment, Jesus came to do an end run around Israel's unfaithful shepherds and shepherded the people himself, but the people proved to be obstinate even under his direct presence. So in effect, he said to that generation, Give me my parting wages, and I'll be on my way. They thought he was worth 30 pieces of silver, Matthew 26:15, which was the price they paid Judas for Jesus' life. Yahweh's commentary on it was a sarcastic, It was the handsome price I was valued at by them. It turned out they used the money to purchase the potter's field for burying strangers, Matthew 27:7. It was Yahweh's money because it came from the temple treasury, so it was Yahweh's field when it was bought. The field was a commentary on the false shepherds who valued Jesus at 30 pieces of silver, that Yahweh would bury them as strangers to himself. Now, speaking of Zechariah, who's a symbol of Yahweh as he continues to use these 2 prophetic staffs, verse 14, Then I cut apart my other staff, even union, that I might break the brotherhood between Judah and Israel. Comment, Yahweh fractured Judah and Israel once before, and according to verse 14, he might do it again in the future. But first, Ezekiel's and Zechariah's prophecies of a union between them would have to be fulfilled. Now, seemingly speaking of a future time in Israel when there will be another worthless shepherd over them, possibly speaking of the Antichrist who will set himself up in Yahweh's temple. Verse 15, Yahweh said to me, Take for yourself yet again the equipment of a foolish shepherd. For behold, I will raise up a shepherd in the land who will not visit those who are cut off, neither will seek those who are scattered, nor heal that which is broken, nor feed that which is sound, but he'll eat the meat of the fat sheep and will tear their hoofs in pieces. Woe to the worthless shepherd who leaves the flock. The sword will be on his arm and on his right eye. His arm will be completely withered, and his right eye will be totally blinded. Comment, Yahweh will give that foolish shepherd what's coming to him. He'll strike his right arm so that it withers, and his right eye so that it's blinded. Zechariah 12 is next.